There are moments in life when a single misstep can completely change a person's destiny. For Uyen, that night was not just an incident, but a silent scar deeply etched in her memory. Even as time passed, even as the morning sun shone on the familiar garden, that fear never left her mind. Uyen sat huddled in a corner of the garden, her back against an old tree trunk. The surrounding space was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. A gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of damp earth and dry leaves, but Uyen felt strangely cold inside. Her eyes were empty, fixed on the space before her, where unwanted memories constantly resurfaced. The words of the gangster from the previous day were like knives cutting straight into her self-respect, vulgar, venomous, and full of malice. Uyen had never imagined that she could be so blatantly insulted and threatened. A mixture of helplessness, shame, and fear overwhelmed her, making her want to disappear from the world. That night, the village road seemed longer than usual. The dim yellow streetlights cast distorted shadows on the rough pavement, stretching beneath Uyen's feet. She quickened her pace, a sense of foreboding rising within her. Then, the feeling of being watched became so palpable that it sent a chill down her spine. Before she could react, a strong force pulled her backward. Uyen panicked. Her breath came in short gasps, her mind blank. She struggled in vain, her trembling hands desperately trying to escape the grip. Amidst the darkness and fear, the thug's sinister laughter rang out, full of self-satisfaction and menace. Uyen realized her own weakness in the face of such a menacing figure. In that moment, she truly thought she had no way out. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but Uyen still tried to cry for help, even though she knew the chances of anyone hearing her were extremely slim. Despair overwhelmed her, making her legs weak and her mind numb. And just then, when hope was almost completely extinguished, a deep, warm voice echoed through the night. The stranger appeared like a shadow. He stood before Uyen, his figure firm, his cold eyes fixed on the gangster. Without fanfare or exaggeration, just a few decisive words were enough to make the man hesitate. The tense atmosphere lasted for a few brief seconds. Then the gangster retreated, his eyes showing clear apprehension. Finally, he fled into the darkness, leaving a heavy silence that enveloped the entire street. Uyen stood frozen. Her legs trembled, her heart pounded, and it took her a while to realize she had been saved. The stranger turned to look at her. His gaze wasn't cold as Uyen had imagined. On the contrary, it held a deep, quiet concern that was difficult to understand. He looked at her for a long time, as if wanting to memorize every facial expression, every trembling emotion. Uyen wanted to say thank you, but her throat tightened. She hadn't even had time to ask his name, hadn't had time to understand why he had appeared at such a crucial moment. And then, the stranger gently turned away. No explanation, no glance back. He walked quickly into the night, leaving Uyen standing there with a series of unanswered questions. On the way home, Uyen cried, not because of fear anymore, but because of an indescribable emptiness. She was grateful to the man, but also bewildered. Why did his eyes seem so familiar? Why did she feel safe standing before a complete stranger? That night, Uyen barely slept. She lay staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. The thought of leaving this place flashed through her mind, but was quickly dismissed. She didn't want to run away. She didn't want to live her whole life in fear. And most of all, she didn't want to disappoint the Anne, the man who had given her a sense of trust and respect. That morning, gentle sunlight streamed into the garden. Life seemed to continue as usual. The An went to the market and bought some simple supplies, including several sturdy bamboo baskets. He remembered Uyen's words about making dried fish and readily brought them back to help her. When Uyen saw the An appear in the garden with the baskets in his hands, she unconsciously smiled. Amidst the turmoil and anxiety, that quiet concern soothed her heart. Together, they set up the drying rack for the fish. Under the scorching sun, Sweat beaded on their foreheads, yet the atmosphere between them was strangely peaceful. No words were needed. Their mere presence was enough to make Uyen feel at ease. During a break, Uyen softly said that she only wished life could continue to flow peacefully like this. Theon paused for a moment before replying that peace wasn't something readily available, but something people had to preserve with unwavering strength. Those words were etched into Uyen's mind. She understood that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least, for now, she no longer felt alone. When Theon received an urgent call and had to leave, Uyen watched his figure disappear behind the trees. The wind blew gently again, and the garden returned to its usual stillness. Uyen took a deep breath. Peace was still here, but she knew it was more fragile than ever. While Uyen was still clinging to the fragile sense of peace in her small garden, elsewhere, tragedy was silently spreading, descending upon Mr. Chin's old house with a suffocating silence. The space was so quiet that even the chirping of insects became clear, as if reminding him that the peaceful days of his family were over. The ringing of the phone startled Mr. Chin. His heart pounded, a familiar feeling of unease rising in his chest. He stared at the screen. The name Bin appeared like a verdict. He knew this call would come sooner or later. He just didn't expect it to come when his spirit was so exhausted. Bin's voice on the other end of the line was cold and sharp as a knife. Without beating around the bush, he reiterated the debt his son had left behind. 60 million dong, a sum not too large for others, but for Mr. Chin at this moment, it felt like a mountain weighing down on his aging shoulders. Bin said he had played fair, that he had waited, but patience had its limits. If Mr. Chin couldn't arrange the money, the consequences wouldn't just be words. Mr. Chin held the phone, his hands trembling. His throat was dry. He tried to beg, but he knew that pleas were meaningless at this moment. He put down the phone and sat listlessly on the old hammock, his dull eyes staring into space. Images of his runaway son flashed through his mind, then of Uyen, the daughter he had once placed so much hope in. They had all left him, leaving him alone to face the consequences. Mr. Chin clearly felt the loneliness and helplessness gnawing away at him little by little. For the first time in his life, he was so afraid. Afraid not for himself, but because he knew that without money, people like Bin wouldn't leave his family alone. While Mr. Chin was still immersed in despair, the gangster who had once ambushed Uyen came looking for him. He entered the house with a nonchalant air, his eyes revealing frustration and greed. The conversation quickly became tense. Mr. Chin blamed him for failing to complete the task, causing a mess. The gangster loudly claimed he had taken risks, wasted effort, and ultimately gained nothing. The exchange grew increasingly heated, not just a quarrel, but a venting of anger between two men cornered. When the anger subsided, the gangster lowered his voice and mentioned another deal. He didn't elaborate, only hinting that it was the only way to get money quickly, enough to resolve all the problems. Mr. Chin remained silent for a long time. A fierce struggle raged in his mind between conscience and fear. He knew the path the gangster suggested was dangerous, even potentially ruining someone's life. But when pushed to the wall, human reason becomes more fragile than ever. Ultimately, he didn't answer, but that silence was a sign of a terrifying compromise. On the other side, Uyen was completely unaware that she was gradually becoming the target of dark schemes. Whenever she had the chance, she recounted to Theon the incident of being ambushed. Uyen's voice trembled, her eyes reddening slightly whenever she mentioned the moment when escape seemed impossible. For her, recounting the story wasn't just about sharing, but also a way to release the fear that still lingered in her heart. Theon listened in silence, his face darkened, his eyes reflecting worry mixed with anger. He blamed himself for not protecting Uyen better. When Uyen mentioned the strange man, her voice softened. She didn't understand why she felt so safe in front of a stranger. That feeling even confused Uyen herself. Anne thought deeply. A sense of caution arose within him, but at the same time, an inexplicable curiosity. He decided to have the gangster's name investigated again, because he understood that if he didn't act, the danger would return. For the An, protecting Uyen was not just a responsibility, but something he willingly took on. At the company, pressure continued to surround the An in a different way. Hoang brought him information that he couldn't ignore. Signs of betrayal from Mr. Tam were like a silent crack appearing in a seemingly solid foundation. The An wasn't in a hurry. He understood that just one wrong step could cause everything to collapse. Therefore, he chose to remain silent, patiently waiting for the right moment. Amidst all this turmoil, the An still wanted to give Uyen a peaceful moment. On the 50th anniversary of the reunification of the country, he took her to a high-rise building. From above, the city appeared vast and sparkling. A gentle breeze blew, bringing a rare feeling of freedom, as if all burdens had been temporarily left behind. As the fireworks lit up the sky, Uyen stood motionless. The brilliant light reflected in her eyes, carrying with it genuine joy and emotion. For the first time in her life, she had watched fireworks in such a beautiful place, beside someone who made her feel safe. In that moment, Uyen almost forgot all her fears and worries. The An told Uyen about the meaning of April 30th, about the sacrifices made to achieve the peace we have today. Uyen listened, her heart filled with pride and gratitude. When they both raised the national flag, that moment became more sacred and moving than ever. But the fireworks eventually faded. The light gradually died down, leaving the night sky silent. Uyen took a deep breath. She didn't know that behind that peace, conspiracies were still silently at work. And it was at this very moment, when she felt more hopeful than ever, that a storm was silently brewing, waiting to sweep everything away.